Hey, Spencer here from leadingworshipwell.com. I want to introduce you to a new series I'm starting here on the channel called The Anatomy of a Worship Ministry. In this series, I'm going to be interviewing a bunch of my worship leading friends about how they run their worship ministry. We're going to be talking about all of the different parts that form their worship ministry so that hopefully you can learn from those things, those insights, and implement some of what you learned into your own worship ministry. So we're going to be talking about how they plan for services. We're going to be talking about how they run a worship rehearsal. We're going to be talking about what they do on Sunday mornings. We're going to be talking about what they do throughout the entire week. I want to start this series because I understand that we all serve in different contexts. Some of us serve in big churches, some of us serve in small churches, but we can all learn from each other no matter what context we serve in. So I want you to have the opportunity to hear from some different viewpoints than just my own. So with that being said, our first guest of the series is Jimmy Cooper from Hey Worship Leader, one of my good friends. Jimmy, I had an amazing conversation with him about the anatomy of his worship ministry. So let's jump into the conversation and I'll talk to you afterwards. Hey everyone, I'm here with Jimmy Cooper from Hey Worship Leader, and we're going to be talking about, I don't think I even told you the title of this series yet, and I'm not sure if I'm going to keep the title of this series, but I want to call it like The Anatomy of a Worship Ministry. It sounds like really intense, but we're going to be going over all the different parts of Jimmy Cooper's worship ministry, among other people that I'm going to be talking to in the future, and we're going to see how their worship ministry is built out. And Jimmy, I also didn't tell you this, but I want you to know as we go through these questions about your worship ministry, like there's no right or wrong answer. I feel like we think or I've felt this way before whenever I'm watching a YouTube video where it's like, well, that person said to do that, and so that must be the only way to do it. But the purpose of this series is to show that we all lead in different contexts. So that changes how we lead our worship ministry sometimes. So I think just hearing different voices from different worship leaders in different contexts is what will help us lead our worship ministries better. So with that in mind, let's talk about the context that you're leading in. Like, we'll start off with this. I just want to hear how you got started in worship ministry. Just give us a quick overview from like how you started up to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on the channel. Again, love speaking with you. And I hope this is beneficial for people because it would be me like just trying to figure out what other people are doing and gain insider wisdom. But yeah, I started learning guitar at 18 and I started leading some songs in a Sunday school class. Some people who were also in that young adult Sunday school class were like, hey, we're starting a Saturday night thing and we need an acoustic guitar player, which is weird. It's usually like bass or drums, but they needed acoustic guitar. And so I showed up to the first rehearsal, and in that rehearsal, the worship leader fired the drummer. It was a little bit awkward. He was like, hey, dude, it's not cutting it. And that worship leader happened to be a drummer as well. He's like, hey, Jimmy, until I find another drummer, can you lead these songs? I mean, this is the first night of rehearsal. I don't even know some of these people, but I just started singing and I led that forever. They never found a replacement. And so I got kind of just nudged into it. And then I just started loving it. I had never played with other people before. And I've talked about it on my channel and maybe on this channel before where I didn't really start for the right reasons. It's not like, oh, I want to serve the local church with my gifts. It was just like, hey, there's a group of people. They need me. Here's a stage. They asked me to sing. I mean, normally it seems like people have to fight for those things and try to, but they just asked me and it just worked out that way. So it's all just God's doing. So through that, learned guitar, learned some valuable lessons in ministry, and it got me to where I am right now in Wake Forest, skipping many years. And same kind of thing. I had another job where I wasn't a worship leader. I was volunteering in my local church as a worship leader, and I was just getting paid part-time, actually, a little bit, very part-time. Many people might know how part-time, a sliver of time. And one of my professors at the seminary I'm at is a pastor in the area. And it's just a kind of a cool story because I knew I wasn't going to be leaving where I was at that moment. I had other churches ask, needing worship leaders is something that's a lot of churches need worship leaders. And anyway, so it was just, to me, it was just another church looking for a worship leader. So I already turned the interview down, and then it was my boss, like a high up boss, was like, "Well, you could at least go eat lunch with him." I was like, "Okay, I'll eat lunch with him, hear him out." So I heard him out, and I turned him down as well. So it was like 2 times I turned down the position.
Jimmy the Heartbreaker.
Yeah, exactly. And it was more about I just felt like God blessed me with the job I was at, even though it was a construction job. I'm a carpenter, and it was helping pay for school. And it was just such a blessing. I was like, it'll have to be God moving me away for me to move me away, you know? And then that's what he did. I told the pastor no, but he asked me to reconsider. And I just had this feeling, I believe it was a prompting of the Holy Spirit. I went home, told my wife, I was like, I told him no, but I think we should pray about it. And and now I'm there. I just celebrated 5 years, and I'm loving it. I've been a part of really small churches, been a part of monster churches, and this is like the perfect right in the middle for me. We have 2 services. Post-COVID now, we're running between the 2, and we're talking about adults in the worship center, about 550 a weekend. So 212 in the first service and 300 and whatever in the second. I don't know. It breaks down something like that. But yeah, that's the context I'm in.
Yeah, great. That's a great overview. I feel like what I heard in that story is like, it reminds me of the narratives in the Bible, whenever you were like, and skipping many years, because in the Bible, it's always like, they don't go over the 40 years of Israel wandering in the wilderness. It's just like the highlights. And so I hope if you are a newer worship leader watching this, you don't look at like where Jimmy's at today, or even where any other worship leader is at today, and think like that just happened all of a sudden one day. Like that happened over many, many years of Jimmy serving just wherever he was.
How true that is.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit more about your current church. You said you're like 500 people total throughout 2 services.
Mm-hmm.
So that probably affects sort of your role at your church and how you lead your worship ministry compared to like my church, where I'm serving in a church of like 100 to 150 somewhere in there. And so you're probably going to hear Jimmy say some things differently than what I usually talk about on this channel. And that's what I mean whenever I'm talking about leading in different contexts. So let's talk about, first of all, do you have any like formal ministry education? I'm not sure if you covered that in your story.
I do, in ministry, actually. My undergrad at Southeastern, where I'm at, the seminary I'm at, is in pastoral ministry. And I'm currently I actually took a couple year break of my MDiv, and I'm really considering going back. I'm in the email. Does this represent email? The email process of like taking a class again in the fall, and probably switching to an MA so I can get done quicker. I don't find myself preaching every week, so I'm probably just not going to do the languages. No judgment. No judgment.
Mm-hmm. But as we talked about over on Jimmy's channel a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how theology impacts your worship leading. So I'll make sure to link that video down in the description below if you're interested in that. Okay, so what is your official title at your current church, and what does that title, what are your responsibilities?
Yeah. So I am not a worship leader. I am the minister of music, which was already set in place when I got there. And I appreciate it because, actually I had a comment on a YouTube video just a few minutes ago I was responding to about the term worship and worship leader. And, my channel's named Hey Worship Leader. I mean, that's what we understand as the role, and that's fine. But what I appreciate about the title is it's like minister of music, because that's, we are not only worshiping when we're singing. And so I think that kind of goes into teaching our people, even though they always call me the worship leader. It just helps kind of put into focus that we are doing the musical part of worship. And I really enjoy that. So the biggest chunk of my responsibility is prepping for the weekend, whether it's getting set lists made, choosing songs, scheduling volunteers, resourcing volunteers. I mean, I would say most of my job, that's what I'm hired for. And I will say up front that a lot of worship leaders have to deal with production. We have a full-time production guy, so I don't have to deal with any of that. I try to learn as best I can, but I feel so guilty sometimes because I know so many worship leaders spread so thin, and on top of it, they're having to deal with live stream and the sound system not working, and I don't have to do any of that.
That's me.
Yes.
You have my dream job. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a blessing, and I can get into how I do all those things, but that's the majority of what I do for
Yeah,
sure.
so with that in mind, why don't you take us through like what a normal week looks like for you in fulfilling those responsibilities?
Yeah. So I try to think. I was trying to think of categories. I'm a planner. I've become a planner, and don't drink again. You're drinking your bottle.
Sorry.
uh, inside joke. Okay, they may. I don't even know if that'll be in the video, but
Last time one of our internets cut out and I was just frozen there drinking my water bottle for like 5 minutes. Jimmy was like, "Man, he's chugging that thing."
I wish I had a video clip, but I did screenshot it, so we maybe
Yeah,
can
yeah.
pop it up on the video what it looked like. But I was talking and it just stayed there forever. Anyways, I'm a planner, and so I've become a planner, like I've said, and so I try to plan out, and I usually start with, and I'll say my pastor he puts out his texts. He preached through a book of the Bible at the time, so at a time, and so I know the text well in advance. And I know a lot of worship leaders don't know that either. You know, they may not know it till Saturday night or something, and it's a different context, right? So the first thing that I do is schedule volunteers, because if I don't have a full band, or I'm struggling with, depending on what who the volunteers are, what the team looks like that week, that's how I go into planning what that week will look like. Not as far as the theme, but it may impact greatly with the songs I choose for the theme that week. So I start with volunteers, and it's for my planning and also for theirs. I've really pressed hard for them and encouraged them to use block out dates, so that and well in advance. So I tell them to kind of look at the next quarter, and I'll send out a reminder like, hey, go ahead and use block out dates. If you don't know how, give them a little tutorial on my phone or whatever. Make sure they're using the app on Planning Center.
Yes. I heard your dog. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. We
So
have dogs. It's life.
are you planning them like you said you use block out dates? Or are they saying like I can't do these dates, but then the week of you're like if they're available for this week, then I can schedule them?
Yeah. So if they're serving somewhere else, they're out of town, or they just want to break, put in your block out dates. That won't let me schedule you. And then I'm assuming if it's not blocked out, you're potentially available. So then I can send out an invite. And so I try to have them do that at least like a quarter at a time, a quarter of the year at a time. And then I try to schedule them 2 months at a time. So I try to stay 2 months ahead or so. Like we just are about to start April. So I think I probably already got through May as far as scheduling volunteers. I even put it on Planning Center way in advance, and then I'll send out smaller chunks at a time. Like, oh, let me go ahead and send emails out for May. And then if I do that, I'm like, well, let me go ahead and look at June and just start planning. So people are like, oh, vacations are coming up, or I'm graduating. Yeah. And then from there, after I've sent out the emails to schedule them, then I'm like, I have this band. Hopefully they responded quickly, and they usually do. And then I can start the songs, picking songs, and I try to schedule the set list out of around a month in advance. That's my goal. I do that pretty well. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm only 2 weeks out now. Let me catch back up, and I'll go ahead and do another month. And things change, and people know they can change. But I try to plan out the songs so that volunteers have time to be listening to them and work on them. So that's about how I go about planning those. And then as it gets closer, like this week, Monday night or Sunday nights, I do my Ableton tracks for the coming week. Tuesday is staff meeting. We finalize any changes if something different is happening in the service. Wednesday morning, afternoon, I'm finalizing my call to worship scriptures and any other spoken or prayer transitions. And then that's it by Wednesday, because then we have rehearsal Wednesday night. That's like the last thing if anything's changing. Like sometimes people are like, I can't make it this week. I might move people around, but most of the time that doesn't happen. So by Wednesday, it's pretty set in stone what we're doing for Sunday.
Gotcha. So how far out in advance are you giving people like the songs that you're going to be leading on Sunday then? Do you send that out like a month in advance with that, and then they just know that it can change potentially?
Yeah, and it rarely does unless my pastor is like, hey, and he doesn't do that often, but sometimes he may say, I want this kind of song after I'm going to be speaking about this. So there's the ability that it might change, or if someone's out and they were singing a song in a certain key and I practice that transition, I may like pick another song that if someone else is singing it so that the key fits. That kind of stuff happens every once in a while, but so a month in advance, and I don't really send it out. They just know like it'll be available when it's up there. Just be checking Planning Center. And I'm a huge planning center person, so I only communicate through planning center. I don't get them used to like, oh, hey, I updated planning center. I don't text them or email them from my personal unless it's like an additional thing I need to tell them. But everything's through planning center. That way, if somebody comes up to me and they say, oh, I didn't know, well, I can teach them, hey, it's all on planning center. It's like a professor. It's like, it's in the syllabus. Planning center is the syllabus.
Yes. So just as we're talking about like getting your team ready with the songs to lead for Sunday, I'm just curious, how many songs do you have in like your worship song repertoire to pick from? Do you have a certain amount?
I do. So I have a document that I will share with other worship leaders or anyone else that picks out set lists or songs. And I think I didn't pull it up. I think it's like a little over 50 songs on there that we could do. But the reason there's that many, it could be like 60, but the first section is potential new songs. So that's also where I put like around 10 or so songs I'm thinking through. And I will say, I also put those songs on our new songs Spotify playlist that we use for people coming into the service. That way, when we do a new song, they're like, that's new. And I'm like, that's working. They know the song already because we've been playing it as they've been walking in the building. So so I have the new songs. Then I have like a list of modern worship songs, I'll say. And then I have a list of hymns that we're doing right now. And so I try to at least do a hymn a week. I love hymns, but I kind of have that in my mind of we're going to do a hymn a week. That way I don't forget them because I'm excited about a bunch of new songs or something. So I try to do at least a hymn a week, sometimes two, and sometimes we do all hymns. I don't mind doing hymns because unlike modern worship, some of the hymns I can't find a version that I want to do. So we just do the open door. I go to Open Door Church. We do the open door version. And I've been there 5 years now. So the musicians pretty much know how I think. I'm like, hey, there's 3 verses. Like, I'm going to start the first one, come in with a groove on the second. We're going to drop out at the beginning third, build it up big, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, that's so funny whenever like your team starts to understand like how you work and that. I lead with a cajon player on Sundays, and at rehearsal this week, like I started to drive this one part, and we always do this thing where we like build up, and because he's playing cajon, like there's only so much you can do. So he just like hits the bass and the snare like doom, 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 doom. And he started doing that right as I was building up. I was like, you finally understand where I'm headed with these songs. Like I do the same thing every song pretty much.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, just to finish up that sort of part of the conversation, is there anything else you do during the week that doesn't relate to getting ready for Sunday? Like, is there anything else that you can think of that you do that's not aimed towards the Sunday service?
Right. I would say, I was trying to think of a percentage. I'm thinking like 90% of my job is getting ready for the weekend. I do meet with people. I have a appointment with a worship person right after this and another one after that. So I go meet with people and I try to spend time and not treat them as a commodity to serve me, but like actually pour into their life and be interested in what they're interested in. I do have a large team. I looked and it's like around 40 people on the team. A large section of that is like vocalists. We have more vocalists than anything, but I am blessed to have like 4 bass players, 1 electric guitar player, and then I also play electric. I think like 3 acoustic players, and I have 3 drummers and 4 keyboard players. So very blessed, and that goes up and down. You know, we're in a transient place, so a lot of people will come or go, but yeah, very blessed to have a large team. So I don't treat them as I'll get to your question, but I don't treat them as a small group necessarily, where like sometimes joining the worship team is almost like that's your small group. Since it's so large, I can't really do that. And I expect them to be in their own small group. So I don't have to, even though we do a devotional, we've used the other devotionals. Sorry. I was about to.
You're about to plug my devotional. Yeah, that's all right.
I'm about to plug your devotional.
Links down in the description below. We are all worship leaders, and 8 weeks devotional for worship teams. And
it's been really good. So I do walk them through that. And so I am leading them spiritually, but I'm not taking on like that small group leader mentality because it's not really a small group with 40 people.
Yeah, that goes back to context, because I always talk about on my channel how I treat my worship team like a small group, because like the worship teams that I've led have been like, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 people at the most, which is a small group, but you're leading a group of like 40 people, so you can't lead that like a small group. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so I'm trying to think of other things that I do that are part of my job that aren't Sunday morning. We have like, it's usually events in the church that they want the staff to be there because we want people to be there. So it's just like we have men's prayer. I used to not be able to make men's prayer because I used to work. It's like on Friday mornings, and I used to work construction as a side job on Friday mornings. That's our day off. But like I make sure I'm there. We have members meetings. There are other events like I just had, we have weddings in the church. And so I have to approve any music that comes through and is being used. I don't have to deal with the production anymore. We've divided that. So like I said, I don't do any of that, which is great. But any events we have like a men's event every year, a women's event where there's going to be worship at these events. So I get ready for that kind of stuff, but majority is weekend focused.
Yeah, it just reminds me that like in ministry, it's so hard to quantify the non like Sunday work. Like whenever I started at my church that I've been at for like a year and a half, they wanted to pay me hourly, and I'm like, I don't know how to keep track of hours in ministry because it's just like there's always something to do, and it's not necessarily I'm at church sitting there picking out songs for Sunday morning, but I don't know how to quantify that I talked to a worship team member about how their marriage was going or something like that. Like, it's just hard to quantify that sort of stuff.
That was actually brought up in our staff meeting. We were looking at one of the guys on staff was helping somebody else find a worship leader job, and he was looking at other job descriptions. And some churches like will plan hourly, like what they want, and then they'll like allot a certain amount of hours a week for like relationship ministry or whatever. And we just thought how cool that was, because some churches are just very, I've spoken with and done coaching with other worship leaders who their pastors are a little like micromanaging or overpowering. They have to like write down hour by hour what they worked on. Different contexts. We're not that way. So that's good. It frees me up to do ministry, and I'm not like in fear of, I got to be doing stuff. But saying that, there is a lot of like admin stuff, which is not the fun things. I mean, I have personal practice time, and I'm making sure the keys are in the right key, but for different vocalists. But then like, I didn't even say this earlier, but I will put sometimes like once a month or so, I'll have an extended period of time in Planning Center, just updating plans and data entry and making sure all the scriptures are in there. And that's not the fun part, but it's got to be done. And then working on Ableton and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've got an understanding of like your preparation to lead worship and how you lead your team. The next thing I'm kind of thinking through this in my head, like the week of Jimmy Cooper, like he starts off by doing these things, and you kind of gave us an overview of the week. Let's talk about like, do you guys do worship rehearsal with your team, and what does that look like? Are you meeting throughout the week, or do you just meet before Sunday services, or what?
Yeah, our worship rehearsal is Wednesday night from 6 to 7:30, and I'm a stickler about time just because I've been in groups where time was too fluid, and I never make it about me. It's always about them. Like, hey, I want to respect your time. We're not finished, but it's time to go. So let's come back Sunday morning. We have a little bit of time on Sunday morning allotted for rehearsal. So we do rehearsal and then run through, which is different than rehearsal. Rehearsal is like, hey, that sounds bad, let's go, like fix it. Run through is like, we're running through, we're not stopping. We practice, and it's with the production team and anyone else who's speaking in the service that day. So they practice actually switching the mic and having the person bring up the mic and, all those things. That's run through. So rehearsal on Wednesday nights from 6 to 7:30. I end on time, even though some people are late, and they're late just because they're trying to get off work and get there. But I'll try to end. And rehearsal looks like we start with not prayer. We start with sound check, like a line check, sound check, make sure everything's good to go. We set our ears during sound check, our in-ear monitors. So just start from 0 because this week might be different from last week. And then as they're sound checking, use that time to dial in your in-ears. After that's done, then we do our like devotion and prayer. I may read a scripture. I might use the We Are All Worship Leaders devotional. And then we'll pray. And I say this every time. I'm like, we're going to pray. Then we're going to do a talk through, a play through, and go home. I usually say something like that so that they're not stressed about how long it's going to take or whatever, and they know what's coming. So then we'll talk through. This is what's going to happen. We're doing 4 songs, which we usually do about 4 songs a week, 2 on the front, 2 on the back end. We talk briefly through the transitions, and then we play through them. last week's rehearsal was like the most efficient rehearsal we've had in a long time, which was good because 2 weekends ago was the worst that we had in a long time. But yeah, we were able to play through the whole set 2 times and still get done by like 7:15. And I'm supposed to cut them off at 7:30. So team was just prepared. They're ready to go. And we played through the songs. I'm like, any questions? Do you want to run through anything again? Everybody's like, good to go. All right, go home, you know?
Nice.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. You don't always have to take the whole time you have allotted. Sometimes people are just ready, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's your rehearsal during the week. What does your Sunday morning rehearsal look like? Or did you
Yeah.
already
So
cover that? Like you run through it with your production team, right?
kind of, but I can tell like my schedule. Like I wake up and I get to the church about our first service is at 9. I get there at 6:45 and start setting up all my gear. And then, yeah, so we have at 7:15, we're doing line check again in case anything changed. We hold events in that same building, so they may have had to strike the stage from Wednesday night. So we just redo that. Sometimes there's a baptism like this last week, so we have to move the drum kit and it just changes some wires. So we're just finalizing, making sure everything coming through the house and they have a good signal sound, and we adjust our ears again if we need to. And then from whenever that finishes, so from like 7:30 to 8:15 is that built-in 45 minutes of rehearsal time. Then at 8:15 is run through. Everyone's supposed to be there. We actually go down the stage and talk through briefly. It's not supposed to be prayer time, but depending on who's leading it, they just feel like since we're sitting there, we should pray. But we actually pray after that again, anyways. But yeah, we talk through it, make sure like, especially like somebody this past week was getting baptized. They were going to be telling their testimony from like in the first service, they're getting baptized in the second service. And so they don't know where to go. They don't know what mic to hold. So that's when we cover all that. And then we actually walk through it. We don't play all the songs and run through, but we do start and stop and practice every transition. That way they can do the lighting cues and the mic cues, and we know what we're going to say. And I practice my call to worship for the most part and practice my prayers. And I'll actually pray in that moment for the service that day, letting the person who's going to come up and speak be like, this is what it's going to be like in the service. I'm actually going to pray. You come on up. And, we just practice all that and run through. After run through's over, we all pray together for the day, and then we're ready to go.
And then you lead for both of your services. And then what time do you get home on Sunday?
Yeah, so we have a 9 and 11. They're both exactly the same. And services are they're scheduled usually to be 75 minutes. So, the second service will get out at like 12:15-ish, and that's about right, 12:15, 12:20. And then depending on how many people talk to me and how long it takes to roll up my gear, I might be home by 1 or something like that. So, yeah. So 6:45 to 1 on a Sunday.
That's a lot. Yeah.
It's been more in the past at other churches. I will say I was at a very large church that had 3 Sunday morning services, but they had 2 Saturday evening services. So we would get there at 1 in the afternoon and leave about 7, and then get there at like 7 in the morning and leave about 1 the next day. So it was a lot more. So I'm thankful for 2 services, and I want 1 service. That would be great.
You want one service. Do you need to move into a bigger building for that to happen?
No, I don't think so, because COVID has been a blessing and got rid of all the people. Perspective, right? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. No, we pre-COVID, we were running about 800 a weekend, and now we're at like, 550 or so. And so we've actually talked about building a balcony. We have room, I think, to build a balcony that would hold another 200 to 250 people. And so we might be able to do that and go to 1 service for a while until eventually if we needed to go back to 2. But we're big on church planting, so we're hoping to be raising up leaders and plant and not get enormous. We're trying to plant churches too. So I think our goal would just be to have 1 big, nice, full service, and then as we grow beyond that, we're sending people out. So that's kind of the vision.
Cool. One more thing, actually 2 more things I want to talk about. Just if somebody wanted to join your worship team, what would that process look like?
Yeah, so I think the plan A would be if they're new, because if they're not new, hopefully I already know about them and they've already auditioned. But let's just say they're new, they're visiting, or they're becoming a member. There's like a members class. There's a whole assimilation, but in that process, they will be encouraged to serve or choose a place to serve, and they have like a sheet of different areas to serve, and they can circle. So if they circle production or worship at all, it comes to our team, and then it's my job to follow up So if they are then interested, I'm like, hey, the first step is to fill out this audition form. And it's a very thorough letting me know who they are. They write out their testimony, and then it's several. And I got this from another church I was at and adapted it for our context, but several paragraphs of expectations and like code of conduct and all that stuff. And they sign it kind of like a contract saying that they've read it and they understand what it takes to be on team. And it gets real practical, like saying, if you're a drummer, bring your sticks. If you're an electric guitar player, make sure everything's in tune and cables working and amp tubes are up to date, and, just practical stuff, as well as like conduct and kind of vision for we're leading worship both on and off the stage, and all that stuff is in there. So once they've filled that out, then I schedule an audition, and I don't hold like audition days. It's an as needed basis, because I might get 1 this month and 3 next month or something. So I just take them as needed. And my audition process, I don't know if you asked, but I'll just run through it real quick. It's the kind of the same thing where I immediately tell them they're going to be playing to Ableton tracks, because we use Ableton. And so they'll sing and I'll just mute their part, with whether it's singing or playing drums or bass or whatever. And sometimes I will join them, especially if it's a female vocal and I want them to practice harmonizing to me, and I want them to sing with me singing harmony. I may get up there with an acoustic and play with them. And I usually have a wireless pack so I can still walk around and see how they're leading, but make sure they're on the click. And I think through all that stuff. And then I say, good job, let's go talk about it. And then we talk, and I have them verbalize their testimony, even though they already wrote it out. I like to hear how they verbalize their testimony, ask them why they want to be on the team, all the important things. Make sure I'm kind of assessing them, and then allowing them to assess me. I open it up. Do you have any questions for me? Like, and sometimes people do. And then I talk about planning center, and I'll say good, or I never say no. I always say, here are some things to work on. I don't feel comfortable in this position yet, but if you will work on these things, come back in 6 months, let's do it again. I want to work with you. And then either they'll be like pumped about that, or they'll be not wanting to do it anymore. It kind of sorts itself out when you work it out that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just put together some training on like the worship team process of how to get people on your worship team. And I think you pretty much follow the system that I laid out, but it just reminded me that if you have the proper steps in place beforehand, then you rarely have to say no, because either, most of the time people just self-select. Like, if they look at your list of your code of conduct and see, I don't live up to that, then not many people are going to be like, yeah, I'm going to lie and like try to weasel my way into the team. They'll just be like, that this doesn't describe me, so I can't be on the team. And then, of course, you always want to say not yet instead of no, and give them things to work on. And then, if they're willing to work on those things, then they're probably going to be teachable and a good fit for your team eventually. So, yeah, that's a good process. Last question, the one everybody cares about, Jimmy. What gear are you using when you lead on Sundays?
Gear. So I don't have it here, but I have a Taylor. I play acoustic a lot, but now more recently we've had more acoustic players, so I'm able to be like the second electric player. But I have a Taylor 414 CE. Love that guitar. Just took it to the Taylor luthier that works on it. He like refretted it and adjusted stuff and put on these like Martin lifetime strings. And he's like, these don't go dead. Like, it'll be, I don't know. And it's been a few months now, and they're great. So anyways, I've been loving that. I rarely play this anymore. It's my Telecaster, made in Mexico Telecaster. I have a Reverend. It's in the case because I just put it yesterday and I haven't unloaded yet. And I have a smattering of pedals that I'll use, mainly Helix World stuff. Yesterday, I played through this pedal board right here. It's still in the bag because I haven't gotten it out yet. But let me just show you, because it's beautiful. I just love the way it looks.
This is what everybody wants to see.
This is what everybody wants to see.
Yeah.
You should start with a little preview of this so that they'll make it through this.
Watch to the end.
Watch to the end. But this is my pride and joy right here. So HX Stomp, this is my amp. I don't carry amps anymore because I'm old and I don't want to pick up stuff. And this sounds amazing. And I can run stereo, and it's awesome. And just 2 direct boxes, MIDI controller, compressor, beautiful Jet Revelation reverb, stereo, my favorite reverb of all time, and a MIDI controlled overdrive. Yeah. So it's pretty simple. And it's lightweight. I'm powering it with a Chalks DC7 power supply. And I got the disaster area MIDI box 4 where I'm running all my MIDI stuff through it. So Yeah, that's
Nice.
basically it.
Thanks for the rundown. Yeah, that's what people
Yeah,
came for, so we saved
yeah.
it till the end.
I do
Hey,
presets. I do presets for like all the Helix products. So each weekend, I am always bringing different things. Like, oh, what are you bringing this time? Because I just want to make sure my presets sound good. I actually play with them live, and so sometimes it's the Helix, sometimes the Pod Go, which I've really been enjoying. The Pod Go. Like if you're thinking about getting into the modeling world, Pod Go has got really good bang for the buck. So I've been enjoying it.
that's funny because you've got that, and like the Helix is like this big, and I
Yeah,
started off with the Line 6 XT Live when I first started playing electric in church, and it's like
it's
this
massive.
big. And I don't know, I loved that thing, and probably didn't sound that good because it's like an old modeling unit, but I
Yeah,
still have it and I still use it from time to time.
nice.
Where can people find you online if they want to hear more from you or check out your Helix patches?
Yes. So I have a YouTube channel, Hey Worship Leader, or
Almost at
YouTube.com.
10,000 subscribers.
We're getting
Getting there.
close.
Let's get Jimmy to
9,100 ish.
10K. Yeah.
Let's do it. That would be awesome. That'd be cool. And then heyworshipleader.com. I'm on Instagram too at Hey Worship Leader. Everything's Hey Worship Leader. But yeah, I sell presets. I also sell like a couple other products that might be helpful if you're not into like the guitar world. I have like a digital worship planner that actually leads through a lot of the things we talked about. I have little prompts in there of like, hey, what do you need to do this week and stuff like that. So you can go to heyworshipleader.com/store or shop. I should know that. I don't ever remember whichever one it is, and go check that out. And also sell worship pads that I created through this pedal board, a Nord through this pedal board, different sounding. There's like 3 different sounds. So yeah, some helpful things. I use those every week in Ableton just as our bass transition, and then the keyboard players can play on top of it and add their special effects.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Jimmy. We'll have you on the channel again soon, and
Yeah,
I'll talk to you later.
appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation I had with Jimmy Cooper. Make sure to check out Hey Worship Leader. I'll link all of his stuff down in the description below, his YouTube channel, website, social media. All of that stuff will be in the description below. So if you want to hear more from Jimmy, make sure to check that out. Also, if you want to improve your worship ministry, I've got something for you. It's called the Worship Rehearsal Blueprint. I think worship rehearsals are the best time to make sure that your team is led well. So I want you to have a plan for your worship rehearsals, and that's why I put together this Worship Rehearsal Blueprint, where I will show you the step-by-step process you can take in your worship rehearsals to make sure your team is led well spiritually, musically, and relationally so that they're prepared for Sunday, they're growing in their faith, and they're growing in their relationships with each other. So make sure to check out that down in the description below as well. And other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.